So, Ms. Robyn Rushing, thank you so much for joining us today. We met a week or so ago at a conference that ULM put on. We were seated at the same table. My wife introduced me to you. I think she got there before me, and I had never heard of what it is that you do. But when I started asking questions, I was taken aback. I did not know we had a program like that here. So you're with ConnectedPathways Network, ConnectedPathways Network. So tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us why you started Connected Pathways Network here in Monroe, Louisiana.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk to you about Connected Pathways Network. My name is Robyn Rushing. I have a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. I have an MBA. I was a healthcare administrator for over 20 years, so I have a lot of background in healthcare and neurobehavioral medicine. My oldest son is on the autism spectrum. He has Asperger's syndrome, and so as a mother, I became very well versed in neurodiversity and what that means to the individual and the family, and the limitations that are placed on them. So having gone through that, as well as being an administrator for programs that address that, when we came to Louisiana, that was one thing that I wanted to do, was to become an advocate, to become a very vocal advocate, and begin this charity so that we could help serve those needs for those people.
So you're able to take your own life experiences, and I would have to assume many experiences from others to get this program started. How old is your son?
He is now 25.
25. So going through this process that has taken you through many different job roles and functions, a whole lot of education, now to the place where you have this organization that you've created. Tell us what that looks like to you. What is this organization about, and what can you offer people through it?
Well, Connected Pathways Network, the idea is exactly that, to connect the pathways. We have a lot of resources for neurodiverse individuals in the education setting.
Can you just tell us, sorry for interrupting you there, but from neurodiverse, tell me, for a layperson view, what does that encompass?
So when we say neurodiverse, basically what we mean by that is the differences in the neurological makeup, the connectivity within the brain. We all have differences in our brain. No two brains are exactly alike. But for some individuals, those differences are maybe a little more distinct and maybe even a little more debilitating. They can be. So, for example, neurodiversity can include individuals with autism. It can be ADHD. It can be dyslexia, dyscalculia, which means that they have difficulty with math or with numbers, putting numbers in the right place. Dysgraphia, maybe they can't write appropriately. It's all over the page. That's because the way that their brain is wired together, the brain just doesn't see it the same. So there's a lot of different things that we can group underneath neurodiversity, but simply it just means that there are differences in each of our brains. And for some of us, those differences make things a little bit more challenging for us to accomplish and on a daily basis.
But it doesn't mean that person's not capable of learning or being an excellent, productive member of society. From what I understand, you're trying to figure out how to best help that individual so that they can accent their best qualities within society. So walk us through kind of what does that actually look like, and why we want this. Why do we want this program?
Well, one of the things that we can do with individuals, and that's any individual, but especially with those who are neurodiverse, is we can do what we call a strengths finder. We can find out the things that they're interested in, the things that they gravitate towards, the things that they are really good at, the things that maybe they don't like or that they aren't as good at. We can identify those pieces and help begin to show them careers, jobs, pathways to those jobs that fit those strengths. For example, my son, when he was originally diagnosed, they told me he would not ever have friends, he would not ever graduate high school, and he would probably never write more than a paragraph because he had dysgraphia, so he couldn't write well. He had autism spectrum disorder, specifically at that time, Asperger's syndrome. And was, he communicated very well very early, but he was very antisocial. So he didn't want to, very black and white. If you gave him instruction, you better make sure that's the instruction that you wanted, because that's the instruction he was going to keep. That was kind of hidden hard and fast. And so for Nick, that's what they told me originally.
So let's just say that's 20 years ago. I would assume that we're not talking about at birth. We're talking about probably when we started getting school age.
Right. He was about 4 before we could get him diagnosed.
So hopefully the medicine or the way information is delivered is viewed completely different than it was 20 years ago, that doctors are trying to give better advice, knowing hopefully we know more now, so that we're not hamstringing parents. Because when you tell a parent that they can't do something, they're not going to be there, sometimes you start limiting the choices they give somebody.
Right. Because if you set the expectation, we tend to reach for the expectation that we're given, or the expectation that's set for us. And if that expectation is highly limited, then we don't reach any further than what we think we can achieve.
Sure.
And so that's the point of Connected Pathways, is to show that with the right supports, with people who are willing to come up underneath and mentor and help these individuals and help the caregivers and help the employers, we can change those outcomes. Even if they are originally told, you probably won't be able to work independently, that may not always be the case. And in my son's case, he began to learn he taught himself how to mod games. He taught himself how to code. He got in touch with Bungie at 15 and began to beta test games for them online at home, because that was something that interested him. I had never thought of that. I'm not a gamer, so I hadn't thought of that. But he did it, and he reached out. And so now that's what he does for a living. He reaches out, he beta tests different types of games, different types of coding, and it makes a living doing that. If I had listened to the original diagnosis, we would have thought that he would have always been at home and never had friends. He has friends all over the world now. But we would have thought that he was very limited, that there wouldn't have been an opportunity for him to have a meaningful life, that it would have been isolated to just family. And it isn't that. And that's what we want to show other families, other individuals who are neurodiverse, who have different interests, all types of interests, but how we can help them build on those interests and become successful with those interests in having a more meaningful life and having a productive career.
What age group of individuals do you envision that this fully realized that you want to work with? What age range?
We generally start working within our workshops. We take from 11th grade and up. So we'll take adults of any age, and 11th grade and up generally because that's working age. So the schools are doing a lot of the education piece. What we're trying to do is take those special educational pieces and build on those and find more about that individual person, find out what really interests them. What are they really interested in? What is it they would like to do? And is that something that they can do? If they need help learning how to do it, or if they need modifications to be able to do it, then we want to make sure that we put those in place. Is there maybe there's an employer that we work with who has a particular place for someone who really likes math, enjoys accounting, enjoys all those pieces. So we find a way to get them through their accounting process, even at ULM. We work with ULM with some of their programs so that neurodiverse individuals who enter their programs can actually come out and find a job. Because again, we're often overcoming some of the social barriers that we have.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. How much does the social aspect play with a lot of the neurodiverse?
It's a really big piece, because most interviews, if you're like I have been, my interviews were behavioral interviews. I'm asked a ton of questions, sometimes in front of a panel of people I've never seen before, and they just throw questions at you left and right, or maybe maybe it's several different interviews. For the individual who's neurodiverse, that may not work well for them simply because they don't work well within a group that they don't know. They don't divulge a lot of information to a group that they don't know or that they're uncomfortable with. But that doesn't mean that they can't do the job.
Right.
So they may very well, if you change that interview, instead of putting them in front of a group of people, you prepare them ahead of time and say, you're going to come in, you're going to meet this person, we're going to ask you about these questions, and then we're going to give you a couple of these items to do because this is part of the work that we do. We're going to show you how and see what you think about it. That's probably a much better way to interview someone who's neurodiverse. You're still asking them questions, you're getting to know them, but you're preparing them ahead of time so that they don't feel afraid or they don't shut down, but so that they can feel confident in what's about to happen and so that they can give you their best input. Because many times what we find is that if we do that well, and that's a job that they can actually perform well, they'll show you that. They'll show you how well they perform. People who are neurodiverse, especially those who are on the spectrum or those with Asperger's, tend to be methodical and correct. They do it the same way every time without exception, which for the employer means I have less errors, I have less time down. They tend to not call in because they like the routine. So they like, if you say be here at 8 and stay till 5, that's what they do. If it's from 8 to 12, that's what they do. So there's this continuity that comes with being neurodiverse because they try to bring their mindset into this framework that's somewhat oriented, very much planned and scheduled as much as they can because that helps them process the information and process their requirements much more easily.
So what advice, I would have to assume that our local government within our school system have programs that are in place to take the students that are neurodiverse to an educational point to where they're ready to be handed off to someone like yourself with the program. But what would you say to the parents that are still kind of struggling with that, thinking that I'm about to have an adult child that's fixing to get out of primary school and I don't know what to do with it? I mean, I didn't intend when I brought a child in this world that I would have to raise them until the day that I died. I don't think that should be the way that a parent would be thinking if there's options that are out there. So what would you say to a parent that may have that thought process?
Well, I can share with them that that's exactly the thought process I had. My husband and I both thought, what will happen to our son if something happens to us? Because there's not a lot of supports out there once they become the age of an adult, 18 or over. You would think that they would be considered, because they are under the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, that, well, they could receive disability funds. The interesting thing about that, my son never qualified for disability, not because he didn't have significant Asperger's, not because he didn't have other issues, but because he has 126 IQ. He's almost a mensis IQ. So we're talking much higher than the average. He can script Python. He can do all of these different things. So from the disability judge's standpoint, he's capable. So now it's finding him a job because he's capable. And I think that's what a lot of parents say, okay, my child is capable, but where's the job? How do I do that? And my encouragement to them would be, especially if you're in Monroe, West Monroe, is reach out to Connected Pathways. Reach out to us, because that's what we are here for, is to help develop your child, help connect your child to organizations that are willing to work with them, who have those job offerings that you may not technically see in the local help wanted ad. It may not read, okay, we're looking for a neurodiverse person to run our warehouse. It's probably not going to look like that. But we will know of those employers who have jobs that we can place your child with. We can work with the individual and find out what their strengths are, and then find the employers that we work with who need those strengths in the various different jobs that they have, and then try to network those together. And that's a lot of the work. That's the boots on the ground part that most parents don't have the access to, don't necessarily have all the connections to get to, but we do. And so that's a way that we can help the family and help those parents find that place.
What would that initial consultation look like? So let's say I'm a parent that I've got a child that's 11th grade going into the 12th grade. We struggle at school for social issues, and we're thinking about possibly homeschooling the next year because high school can Thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this podcast. We really appreciate your involvement. Please leave us a comment, or even better yet, subscribe to this podcast and hit that notification bell so that you can be alerted for every new episode when it hits. High school can be brutal on a social aspect.
Exactly.
I tend to think that the hardest part of middle and high school is not the books; it's the social issues that happen within the school system, and it's part of growing up. And I know that. But when you have someone that is neurodiverse, it's that much more complicated. Even for a very squared away or neurotypical person, it's difficult. So I can assume that's just gut wrenching to parents having to see their kids struggle in that avenue. So what would you say to them? What would that first consultation look like? If they see this podcast and say, well, you know what? And that could be an option. What would that look like, and what would the cost be? Is it something that they can afford?
Well, Connected Pathways Network is a charity. So the work that we do with individuals is free. It's no charge.
Wow.
So we have psychologists, we have special education professionals, we have business individuals, HR representatives that can help. So we have a lot of very skilled, licensed individuals who can help. We do not provide clinical psychology, so I want to make sure that I make that clear. So we're not diagnosing. What we're doing is trying to find the workplace pieces that we can fit together. So we help the individual learn how to talk to peers, learn how to utilize other resources. There are a lot of tools out there that can help them navigate work, such as there's Microsoft tools that can help you put, speech and text together so that they can work through that. So we help them in that way. So the parents can reach out through ConnectedPathways.org. They can fill out an information request there, and we'll get back in touch with them. And then what we would want to do is meet with the family, if that's possible, and then meet with the individual and go through. We have a series of discussions and a test that we do that kind of gives us a better idea of where their skill set is, what their desires are, what their dreams are, what the things that they enjoy to do, and where their social limitations are. Is it just with large groups? Is it that they don't want to be on camera? Is it that they don't want to talk to other people? Maybe they're nonverbal. Maybe they don't speak very much. How do we make that work? And there's a lot of resources that we have to make that work, even in the area of employment, where we can even take individuals who are maybe nonverbal or less verbal, I guess I should say, and help them find ways that they can communicate well at work so that they know what's expected of them at work, maybe put them in a role where they can do a lot of tasks that don't require them necessarily to communicate with someone else to do. So that would be our initial approach, would be to meet with that family, meet with that individual, find the skill sets they have, find their communication preferences, find their learning preferences, and then help begin to build what a pathway looks like for them leaving school. Maybe it's even from moving from middle school, or if you've been homeschooled and you're wanting them to go back into the public school, maybe we can help you build a pathway that helps with that process. One of the things that we're doing with ULM right now is that new students who come on board who are neurodiverse, if the student affairs and department, Dr. Fields is vice president of student affairs, and if she and her team are aware of an individual coming in to the university, then my team of mentors can go in and find out what's the schedule going to be, who are all the professors. So we can take that individual and do a special orientation so that they get to see what the classroom looks like. They get to meet that professor.
So
they get
these
to
are
understand.
Just average students that are coming in, their family may not even be from here, but they're coming in to earn a degree. but have some challenges in that area, and your team can come and wrap their arms around them.
Exactly.
And integrate them in.
And make that transition so that the first day of class isn't the first day of class, so that they aren't just taken off guard by, 5,000 students entering the same building and 40 students.
I mean, it's
in a
almost like
classroom.
giving them a competitive edge.
Yes. So it allows them to have this mentorship ahead of time so that we can help take some of that anxiety away. And that's the goal. And that's the idea with work as well.
With the, I guess we'll call them clients, they're not patients, but when your clients come in and agree to start working with you, what have been some of the responses that you've seen? Because I can imagine someone that is neurodiverse, any new environment could be a challenge.
Right.
What are you seeing as far as the responses of what you guys are doing in their lives?
Well, I'll give you an example. We had a young man that came in. He'd been in the foster care system almost his entire life, and he was on the autism spectrum and had been extremely aggressive as a younger child, easily angered. He had some traumatic issues when he was younger. So there were all types of things that were impacting him that complicated his neurodiversity. And when he came to us, originally what we had been told by his social workers and medical team was that they just wanted to see if it was possible for us to help him communicate with other individuals without getting upset. And so what we did was we started a communications, kind of like a communications gameplay, communications orientation sort of, and began to help him see that he could communicate, that there were ways that he could talk to people that wouldn't be seen as odd or different, where he could be accepted in small groups, and then we began to build those groups. And the interesting thing about that was that we taught him how to fill out a job application, because they don't always know. Or if they have dysgraphia, they may not be able to write it out, or they may not know how to do it online. So we walked him through how to do that. We walked him through how to go through an interview, what an interview process might look like, what it might look like with one person, what it might look like with 3 people, what it might look like if they were giving him a task to do to repeat. And so he went through that. That process was about 6 months. And we were able to get him a position with Bausch & Lomb, who has a warehousing company. They ship out contact lenses to ophthalmologists across the country. And so he began doing that for 3 hours a day, 2 days a week. Very, very short periods of time. He was only working with one specific individual. The times were set so that it was advantageous for him. He actually took a bus from his home to get to work and then back home. He didn't want to learn to drive, so he took the bus. And so we helped him with that. And our mentors continued to work with him over the next year. And this was a very amenable employer in that they wanted to see him succeed. So as we worked with him, we began to help him develop. There was a buddy system that we set up for him with other employees. So he began to network within those buddies, and they began to talk, and so he felt comfortable with them. So then they began to teach him another step and another step. That was 4.5 years ago. He is now the director for that particular warehouse unit. Wow. So he went from not being able to, or not wanting to talk to people that he didn't know, to being able to go through an interview, being able to fill out an application, then being able to build relationships with one peer, then another colleague, then a few. And eventually, over time, as we began to work with him and work with that employer, he was able to go on to he is now fully independent, makes his own money, he pays his own bills, he rents his apartment, and he has a job that he loves. So those are things that can happen. And that's the way that we like to work with the individual. And we have a partnering firm that works with employers to help them develop programs, HR programs that support neurodiverse individuals. So we work together with them so that we can build those types of scenarios, and so that we can take situations that look like they may not be possible and make them possible. We kind of take them outside the box, flip the box upside down, turn it around, and stand on top of it and say, we can achieve this if we work together. All of us working together. That's the parents, that's Connected Pathways, and that's the employers and the individual with neurodiversity. We can work together to help them become successful in what they want to do. And then it brings success to the employer as well.
And to the community as a whole. So this is what I heard you say, is that it took a lot of time from people to invest in a person's life that was worth investing in. To an individual, had you guys not invested the time and talents into that, would probably be someone who would be counting on the government to take care of them from here on out. Because, I mean, what you described to me was someone that was not capable of running a warehouse in the beginning, that may not have been capable to hold an entry-level position full time. But because people need other people to believe in them and invest in them, and by doing that, to me, that's what community is. By doing that, we can see others grow. Me as a layperson, not fully understanding the effects of neurodiversity within our community and within individuals, what are some of the things that we can do to have a better understanding of the things that we can help or support in, whether it be as a community member, whether it be someone in someone's class, or someone that's in the workforce and a new individual comes on board? What can we as a community do to help people with neurodiversity? I know it's probably a really big ask, but before we started this podcast off camera, I mean, I just told you straight up that I felt like, maybe at a time just using the word normal, I might have offended somebody, and I never my intent, but sometimes we just don't know what we don't know until we know. So what would you want the community to know and understand about the neurodiverse? And I've learned today and over the past couple of days that neurodiversity is a lot of stuff. It's not, you can't put it in a box and say, all we're talking about is autism or people that are on a spectrum, because everyone's going to be different and different. What can we learn from this as just a community?
I think one of the main things that we can do as a community is to try to recognize that we have biases, even if we don't want to admit it. When we see someone who behaves differently than we do, or if we see someone who withdraws or looks away or who doesn't have constant eye contact, we often assume the negative, or we assume that that person's different. Wait, I'm gonna step back. That's not okay. And I think that that the main thing for our community is to realize that just because they're different doesn't mean that they aren't valuable, that they aren't just as valuable as anyone else in our society, that we all have our own differences. If we think about it for a moment, we probably don't learn the same way.
Sure.
We probably don't speak the same way. We don't all have the same dialect. We all have differences. And so because our brains think a little bit differently, or maybe process information a little bit differently, I hope that our community will begin to look at it as, if they see it differently than me, maybe there's value there. If they see it differently, maybe together we could find something new. We could find a better way. Maybe we could do this faster. Maybe we could do it better. Maybe we could have less errors. Maybe by coming together, we can build a stronger community. We can build a better society, because the reality is these individuals have differences that we tend to pick up on that we really should embrace, not push back against. And if we can do that, no different than, as I said before, no different than someone who learns different in the classroom. These individuals may learn differently. They probably pick up much more than what we assume. I think a lot of times we assume that because they're not speaking to us, that they're not grasping. they're probably grasping everything that you said in tremendous detail. Just because they don't speak back at that moment doesn't mean that they didn't. A lot of times they're processing so many thoughts per second. And I'll give you an example. My son says, Mom, when you say church, I see every church, every steeple I've ever seen in any book ever. And that all processes. It's 10,000 of them all at one time. So if I don't give you an immediate answer when you ask me, it isn't because I didn't hear you or because I don't want to respond, but I have all of that information running through my mind.
That I have to process.
And then I process that to give you that right answer. So it may take me a little longer. And for many neurodiverse individuals, it may take them a little bit longer. It isn't because I think a term that I used to hear a couple of decades ago, but I would, oh, this person is slow.
Yeah.
They may be slow in responding, but their thought process is not necessarily slow. More than likely, they're processing a tremendous amount of information to give what they believe is the best answer, or processing that information to do the right maneuver or take the right step. And so I think if, as a community, we can understand that a little bit better, and when we see these individuals realize that there's so much more going on there, there's so much value underneath what we see at face value, then I think that it gives us all a better grounding. I think it brings us all closer. I think it helps us be stronger, become stronger as a community. And that's what we really want to see, is to see our community become stronger, support one another.
Everybody has value. We just need to make sure we take the time to understand that person's unique value they can bring to the table. So now let's talk about the employers. What was interesting when we first met, you were talking to me about the huge benefit from an employer, and you touched on it briefly, but I'm sitting here imagining how someone that loves their routines, that thrives on routines, and that they make very few errors, they're very diligent in what they want. What employer would not want that?
Exactly.
You know, the complaints that I hear from small business owners that can't get people to show up to work. When they show up to work, they want to stay on their phone all the time. They don't care about the tasks that they're doing. They go through the motions, and most of the time it's not even right. Matt Dickerson says everybody wants warm bodies, but you give them a warm body, they don't want a warm body. They want a trained body to be able to do the workforce. It's that whole workforce development. We need people who are knowledgeable. We need people who are knowledgeable to show up and want to do the work. So talk to me about, from an employer standpoint, if we got employers knocking down your door saying, I need qualified people, that would be a beautiful thing, right?
Exactly.
And you have a pathway to start connecting those dots. If people will just open up and say, look, there's a tremendous resource, we need to press into it. So give us some of the benefits of what you've seen in the past with employers, not only from the employer-employee relationship, but I think there's also some additional benefits an employer could have. So walk us through some of that.
Okay. Well, what we found, we actually did a recent research study. There were 100 organizations across various different industries. So we had them from accounting, medicine, retail, warehousing, so various different industries that had developed neuro-inclusive HR programs. So they had changed their internal culture to want to include and to have better acknowledgement and education about neurodiverse individuals. So when we looked at that, when we started the program and brought those individuals through, at the end of a year, we took a look at what was performance like, what was turnover like. We found a 48% increase in productivity across the board. When we made it more neuro-inclusive, it was more productive, not just for the neuro-inclusive, but for all employees, because our HR process changed. So when we made it more neuro-inclusive, when we made it better understanding, when we gave different options for finding the right people, we found that performance improved by 48%. We found that turnover decreased by 24%.
Is it
Our
because
people stayed.
you're hiring the right people?
You're hiring the right people. You're keeping the right people. And when your performance improves, your turnover decreases, we saw improvements in our bottom lines. And so for those organizations, we saw not only improvements for the neurodiverse individuals, but for all individuals all across that enterprise. And to me, that was significant. I had assumed that we would see some improvement, but a 48% improvement in productivity overall across
huge.
that's huge. That's huge. So why not make your
I know
workplace
companies right
more
now, if you just say, hey, if you give me a 15% improvement,
exactly.
I mean, I'd be jumping for joy nonstop, but for 48%, that's just impressive.
Right. And I just did I consulted with a local hospital, and we were trying to, at that time, the goal was to change their turnover rate. And they wanted a 4% change. And we got a 20% change.
Wow.
And that was what we did, was because we brought in individuals who were neurodiverse, but also because we just developed this full neuro-inclusive HR process. So the way that the interviews were done, the way that onboarding was done, the way continuing education and the way that feedback was given more continual instead of once a year. We did those things, and we saw these tremendous improvements. And so that's one of the things that I would say to an employer. It's worth it to consider making your organization more neuro-inclusive, because there are significant benefits to you for doing that, along with there are additional incentives to organizations who make that happen.
So how long have you been running this program here?
So for here, we just started at the first of the year. I did this in Wisconsin for about 6 years.
How prevalent is this throughout the nation and communities, doing what you're doing?
Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of advocacy programs out there right now. The U.S. government has a program currently that they are running. It's been in place, I think, since 2016. Started out with 85 companies. One of those was Microsoft. By the way, currently Microsoft, one of its most productive units in all of its offices is its what they call the autist unit, and they are autistics who work for them on code. Because guess what? Once they learn to code, once they learn to put it in place, it's done. It's done right. It's every time. They're always there. Their errors are lower. And for an IT company, that's huge. And so now almost all IT companies, if you go out to Silicon Valley, almost all of them have a huge neurodiverse population within their organization. So, things like that, as we see what it can do, I'm hoping that we can not only reach Monroe and West Monroe, but I'm hoping that we can grow this throughout the Delta, and hopefully introduce the value of it to our legislators so that they can see that it's needed across the nation. Right now, it's estimated that 20% of our population is neurodiverse in some way.
I was going to ask if you had any type of stats to know.
Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at 20%, and they're expecting that to increase over the next 5 to 10 years.
How productive do you feel like that within the community that 20% is?
Right now, 80% of all neurodiverse individuals are unemployed.
Wow.
So we know that we have this significant opportunity to improve productivity, to improve outcomes, to improve employee engagement, and yet this is an untouched market. Out of all disabilities, neurodiversity is the most unemployed. And to me, that's just breathtaking that would even be the case. You wouldn't assume that. They tend to have extremely high IQs. They have very specific skills and abilities that they can use if they're allowed to. And part of that is removing that stigma that this person's different. Well, they may be different, but that difference may very well be the difference in your sustainability as an organization.
Correct.
And so 20%, that's a lot. And that's actually even a global number. We're seeing that. There's studies done in the United Kingdom that see very similar numbers to what we see here. They start a lot earlier with children and trying to look for diagnoses and treatments. So they start a lot earlier. And then, of course, their workforces, that neuroinclusion is just part of the way, especially for Finland, Switzerland, those particular countries. But I think if we could do more of that, if we could see more advocacy, see more employers who are willing to give, and I'm not trying to say or paint the picture that it's easy. We say that we have neuroinclusion, and so tomorrow that's what we have, and we're all good. It's a work in progress. There's no doubt.
Absolutely.
But the end result,
the
sustainability, it's
so
worth it. Our community doesn't have to leave. Right now, we have individuals who are going to other places because they didn't have the supports that they need. So Connected Pathways have tried to give them a competitive advantage by staying here, by letting them know that their community is willing to wrap its arms around them.
It's a win-win-win all the way around.
And build us all the way around. Build it stronger. Our chambers are definitely interested. Both mayors for both Monroe and West Monroe have been extremely supportive of this initiative, because we realize that in order for our society to grow and to grow well, in order for our communities to become sustainable and to continue to grow, and to continue to have young entrepreneurs and workers who can do it, we need to address this particular group of individuals who's 20% of our population. So
had no idea it was that high. I probably lost a bet. I mean, that's a lot of people.
And you have to recall that within that 20%, it's not just autism or ADHD. Oh, yeah. So we have acquired neurodiversity, which could be from a stroke or from a head injury, from a bicycle injury, motorcycle wreck, PTSD. Our veterans who are coming back from overseas, they have many of them have PTSD or other issues. And once they've gone through their VA systems or their other providers for assistance with managing their PTSD, then it's getting the employers to see that they can truly benefit. And in Wisconsin, I built an intensive care ambulance service that was almost all from veterans that had come back with some level of PTSD, but they were trained to be EMTs, National Registry paramedics. They had dealt with so many adverse events overseas when they came back. That tended to be a role that they fit really well in, because they learned how to de-escalate situations. They could work well under pressure. So when you're dealing with life and death, they worked extremely well.
Right.
None of our other competitors had thought about that might be a way to bring our veterans back in to the workplace. But that was a way that we were able to do it and made it work. And it was extremely successful in doing that. We had a young man that led one of our teams. He was a security attaché to one of our Joint Chiefs of Staff, and had seen quite a bit of action overseas. And so when he came back, he's like, I've been a soldier my whole life. What am I supposed to do? We brought him in and helped him work through some of those pieces. And then as an employer, brought him on board, and he became a leader and was able to train and develop others. And so, I think it's important that as a society, we understand that while autism is a big part of neurodiversity, it isn't the only part. Sure. There are many different, both you can be born with it or you can acquire it.
Even with our veterans, it's very disheartening to myself when you hear people look at that veteran and say, well, there's nothing wrong with you. Why don't you get out and just go to work? I mean, there's plenty of people hiring. Why can't you make it happen? But it's that unseen injury that they have to deal with on a daily basis that I'm sure is so frustrating for them. There's no more help. Nobody believes. I don't know what to do next. And we wonder why the suicide rate is so high amongst our veterans when they come home. They start losing hope because they don't know that anyone else is out there to help them. So from an employer standpoint, so if we have an employer that's listening right now, it's like, you know what? I want to be all in with my community, and I want to get behind this. What does that look like for an employer?
I think one of the best things that they can do is reach out to their human resource professionals. SHRM. I know I'm speaking at an SHRM event this month on inclusion, but they can also reach out to ConnectedPathways.org. And then I have a consulting firm for organizations specifically. It's hgblackman.com. And we have consultants who have worked as CEOs, who are also psychologists, IO psychologists, that work with organizations to build a neuro-inclusive program so that we can help them say, what types of jobs do you have? Not every organization's neuro-inclusion program is going to look exactly alike because
absolutely.
they have different needs.
Yes.
They have different jobs. They have
In
different
which
needs.
we need that, though, right?
Right,
We need the whole spectrum,
and they
not
have
just
different
one little lane, the whole spectrum.
Exactly. And so that is one of the things that we can do between these two organizations is work with the employers to find out what do you want to achieve? How can we help you do that? What does neuroinclusion look like for your team? Maybe it isn't every department. Maybe it's these 3 departments. Maybe it is your entire organization, but maybe we start with one place. Maybe we start in one area. Maybe we simply start by making our job descriptions more universal, more simplified to read so that when you post it online, the neurodiverse individual understands exactly what, because they tend to be very literal. So what does that mean? What does that look like? And maybe it's, how do we interview? Maybe there needs to be more than one way to interview a candidate for your organization. And how do we make that happen so that it's efficient and effective for you? And then, we can help them build that out so that both the organization benefits and the individual that's brought on to hire. And again, like I said before, we saw tremendous benefits even for the neurotypical individuals that were there, the individuals who didn't identify themselves as being neurodiverse. Even they saw benefits when the neuro-inclusive process was put in place, because it's the way we communicate with better clarity. It's the way that we put our signage up so that it's more consistent. It's the way that we evaluate, again, so that it's more routine and more consistent. It's those types of things.
I think sometimes we lose sight of, from generation to generation, that this is how I learned when I was coming up, but these were the things I was exposed to when I was coming up, versus what the new or the next generation is having to deal with. We didn't have, when I was a young kid, we were not texting. We didn't have that. We still had cords attached to our telephone at that point. So the way we consumed information was so much different back then than it is today. So people are learning things differently than what we did. And if we're not trying to adapt to where people are at, we're going to be missing some of the best people that we could probably try to attract. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. I think if we don't develop more neuro-inclusive workplaces, then we're looking at somewhere between 20 and 25% of the upcoming workforce that we're not going to have access to. And that's a shame, considering the value that additional side of our workforce can bring.
So I don't know how much you can go into it, but what you're describing to me is a gold mine for our community. Number one, we've got educated professionals that know how to help people that are neurodiverse and connect them with corporations or local employers that want to help them get to that next and be productive members of society. But the thing of it is that I hear is that you're a charity, and that I know that funding always becomes a challenge when something is free for people. So can you go in and tell us a little bit of how you guys are funded? And is this something that we're here for now, but we may not be here forever?
Well, we are funded solely by donation and grants. So we have applied for several grants. One of those is a research grant. Then there are some local grant opportunities that we've certainly are applying for. And then we have a donation tab. If you go to the website, ConnectedPathways.org, there's a donation tab there. And so we rely on those donations. Our IO psychologists myself, and then my vice president, Dr. Stacy Eisenhower. She is an IO psychologist. She's also dual masters in psychology and special education. But we donate all of our time. So she teaches at a private school. She teaches elementary grade there in special education, and then I do consulting through H.G. Blackman. But all of the time that we give to Connected Pathways, we donate. Now, there are other individuals that come in, our IT people who come in to help. So if we find a neurodiverse individual who likes IT, I have someone who does programming. I have another who does cybersecurity. So we have different individuals who come in to give time into those workshops to help our neurodiverse clients.
But you need funding.
But we need funding to be able to keep that happening. The equipment that we need that provides the software and items for our neurodiverse clients, it's not cheap. So, the donations that we receive helps us provide those items for those neurodiverse clients so that we can teach them as much as we can, so that we can help them learn and adapt. And then, of course, so that we can put in the time that we need to. Some of our clients need a couple of weeks. Some of them need 6 months or a year.
Sure. I can see that.
And so we try to mentor and we want to be there. But the number of people that I have who can be there is limited to what we receive in charitable donations or donations in kind.
Are there any donations in kind? Tell me a little bit more about that, because I know that there's a lot of corporations that if you choose to donate to an organization, the corporation will match. Do y'all help educate people on that as well?
We do. We currently have one company that has agreed to match our next $10,000 in donations. They will match it. So that's a matching offer that we currently have. We are going to be opening, we have plans to open a coffee shop that is nonprofit so that we can employ neurodiverse individuals there so they can learn skills and they can stay there and work if they want, or if they want to use that just as part of their training, they can do that, but they're paid. So the money that's charged for the coffee actually goes into paying the neurodiverse individuals so that they can learn what it's like to work and have that kind of environment. The coffee, we have a Majesty Coffee who donated the machinery. And then we have America, which is donating the CNC machine because we can make some different, we have some of our neurodiverse clients that are very artistic and they like to make coffee mugs and different types of ornaments and things like that. So they can make those with those machines, sell those, and again, they get those proceeds go back to them. But we've had the companies that make those pieces of equipment donate those pieces of equipment so that we could then come in and open the shop. So that's a goal. We're hoping to have that open by the fall.
Do you envision having any type of fundraising rounds that you guys are thinking about, any type of events?
We are hoping to have an event in October. We don't have our dates. We're going to be posting those on the website, hopefully within the next month. But we have a fundraising event. It will be a dinner, a silent auction, and then a lot of information provided for both neurodiverse individuals, for employers, for families, for caregivers. So we'll have a couple of different speakers that will be there. But definitely we're putting that together now. And the intent is to educate and fundraise at the same time.
Well, I think it's a blessing that we have you in our community that's taken the lead to get this started. Had no idea 20% of the population could be affected, or not even in the workforce, because of the challenges that we face as a society of incorporating the neurodiverse within, or just the lack of knowledge of how to do it. Like I said in the beginning, I don't know what I don't know until I know. And now today I do know a little bit more, but this is my big takeaway, is that without people like you putting your yes on the table, willing to kind of trailblaze through this until the funding comes is huge. And I kind of feel a little bit bad that I'm not trying to do more in my life to be able to help the underserved. But here's my commitment to you. is that we're going to do everything that we can. Anytime there's an opportunity to fundraise, we're going to try to be there to support and be able to get the word out for you guys. Because just like the all the hard work that the team with the A School is putting in, to having someone like you that's going to come in right behind those people, because I know with the momentum that they've got, even though they're to fourth or fifth grade right now, they're going to have it all the way to high school. I know it. I feel confident they are.
Plan.
And then to be able to have someone like you to come in behind them and to be able to connect the dots between them and an employer so that we have productive people in our society that can actually teach us things about ourselves, teach us things about the daily life that we were not ever exposed to before. But they're good, productive people, and we that's what we want. I mean, everybody wants the American dream, and just because they were not born the same way as you were born doesn't mean they deserve it more or less. Everybody deserves the same opportunity. So
exactly.
I really appreciate you pouring your heart into this, and I'm really glad that we got to sit at a random table and I got to meet you and hear about this. We want to come alongside of you, and anything we can do to help get your message out or help support through fundraising efforts, I want you to count us in.
Well, thank you very much. I truly appreciate that.
We want to be a friend to the organization because there's nothing but good that can come from it. I mean, it's not every day that you get to see something start from the ground and be able to flourish in a way that's adding value back into the community. We always want to focus on the negative things out there or the salacious whatever, but nothing makes me more happy than to find a way that we can make our community grow, and just to be a part of that's just amazing. So thanks again for the work that you do, and I can't wait to see where this takes off to go.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this podcast. We really appreciate your involvement. Please leave us a comment, or even better yet, subscribe to this podcast and hit that notification bell so that you can be alerted for every new episode when it hits.